Okay, good evening everybody. Welcome. The first few words, I guess, thank you for all of your hard work. Assignment 2. I'm saying that before I've actually looked at your assignments. No, from the questions that I've had on DSO and some emails and other to and forwards and backwards of correspondence, there's been some excellent questions out there. So I'm very pleased to hear that. I think what I want to get out of the assignments, if you like, is to see that you're actually learning something. So I'm hoping that you've learned something. That's all I want. Obviously, you're looking for some good marks, and I hope that we can give you those. Just a note on the assignments. I think assignment 2 is a tough assignment. You probably figured that. I don't know what the assignments are like for the other units that you're doing. But for those of you who did assignment 1, to go out and actually contact an organisation, talk to them, interface, that takes a bit of guts. So well done to all of you who went out and accepted that challenge. Those of you who did part B of assignment 2, again, that's a tough assignment. It is actually an assignment which is ongoing in our industry. Sean Cody, who you met last night, didn't tell you, but he's actually got the job of updating the ComCover enterprise risk management benchmarking tool. And the one that I sent you, the questionnaire that went out, that came from the request for proposal, and Sean and the Deloitte team actually won that proposal, or that job. So just to give you an idea, what you did in part B is right sort of up there in terms of what the Big Four and other major consultancies are struggling to do. So it's no easy task. So well done, all of you, for having a go at that. And I hope it was really an opportunity for you to try and put all the pieces together in terms of enterprise risk management. I've been asked to announce the SETU sort of feedback forms and questionnaires that I think you have to fill out. This is a university sort of issue. I'm not that familiar with how it all works. As probably most of you know, I just come in here on a Thursday night for 3 hours and lecture to you guys and actually have a real job in the real world. So this is just for fun, so they say. But what we're interested to hear from you is your feedback for this particular unit. Now, you probably had this lecture. I don't know, has anybody had this lecture already about the SETU test for other units? Just put up your hand if you've been told. No? Okay. Basically what it is, for those who haven't been involved, there's an online questionnaire that we want you to fill out, just providing your feedback as to what you thought of the course, the content and the teaching style, the lecturer, the assignments, the exam, and just general feedback. Obviously, we're interested to hear your feedback because it's the only way really we know how to improve the course for the next round of students and the like. From my experience last year, I think most students actually completed it after the exam. So once they sort of had a go at the exam, they felt more confident to actually provide some feedback. It might be premature otherwise until you see the exam. So I think you've got until the end of June to complete it, and feel free to be honest, and we look forward to checking out that feedback. All right, tonight is our last sort of time together. So, yes, very sad, but anyway. Really what I want to do tonight is give you guys an opportunity to ask me questions instead of me talking to you, and it's an opportunity if you've got any sort of questions or areas that you want me to explain a little bit more about. Perhaps you've had a chance to have a look at some of those past papers. Feel free to bring those questions up. But I thought one way to just get the sort of discussion going a little bit would be a quiz. So I want to get a feel for where you guys are at as well. It's difficult for me to judge how much is sinking in and where the gaps are. But I thought what I'd do first off, give you maybe 5-10 minutes, have a go at these questions. I'm happy for you to discuss it with your friends, see how you go with the answers, and then we'll sort of work around the room and see what kind of answers are around, and maybe that hopefully will spawn a few other questions. So it's about 10 past 6 now. So 5 or 10 minutes. I'll see how you're going. If you're all finished, then we'll have a discussion. So have a go at some of these questions. I'm not going to mark your papers or anything like that. It's really just a way for me to try and gauge where you're at. So and then it may lead on to some other questions. So if you want to check other notes or talk amongst yourselves, that's no problem at all. So have a go at that, and we'll chat some more in a little bit. Okay, who do you think? Who's got all the answers? Anybody think they can answer all of them? No hands. 4, 3, 2, 1. I saw one hand go up when I said 1. How are you guys going? Do you need a few more minutes, or are you ready to have a chat? Blank looks. Okay. I know the answers. I know you're just shy. I know you've all got the answers. Okay. So, anybody want to have a go at number 1? 3 common pillars of sustainability. Anybody want to have a go at that? Environment is one. Let's write these down and let's see if we can get the. Hang on. Not can. Let's find a piece of paper. Turn the lights up for you. Hang on. Right. Okay. All right. My writing's not very good, so please excuse me. 1. Okay, environment. Yep. Another one? Social. Another one? Yeah. Let's we call that economic. Economic. Okay. All right. That's not very clear, is it? Okay. Let's just talk about that a little bit. What type of things do you think would be included in the environment section? So let's again stick with we talked before about the AMCOR sustainability report. Can anybody remember what type of information would be included, perhaps for a company like AMCOR, packaging company, manufacturing? What type of information do you think they would include it as environmental information in their sustainability report? Anyone, any thoughts? Emissions, yeah, emissions, things that are going to impact or affect the environment. So we've got things like emissions. What kind of emissions might? There's only one in, I think, in emissions. Emissions, yeah. What might that lead to? What kind of emissions might we be interested in? Carbon, yeah. Okay. Carbon. So we're interested in maybe carbon footprint. What do we mean by carbon? People don't actually just chuck carbon out into the street. What does that sort of lead on to? Thoughts? Greenhouse. Okay. Yeah. What a greenhouse? What? Sorry. Global warming. Yeah. But I'm thinking I'm a factory. You know. I don't make global warming. What do I make? What do I release? What kind of things? Carbon footprints. Carbon dioxide. Yeah. So carbon dioxide emissions are common. Yeah. So we're interested in carbon dioxide. Okay. So other types of emissions. Anybody got any ideas? What other kinds of emissions might go on with factories? Sorry? Chemicals? Yeah, chemical emissions. So we might be looking at sort of chemicals which are coming out of the factory and going into the atmosphere. Yeah. So those chemicals, they might be, in form of gases and vapors which go out. Also, those chemicals may be sort of liquid waste as well, which are going out into the sewerage systems and those types of things. So it's gases, liquids. There's some solids as well. Some special chemicals come out as solids, and they have to be specially treated. And those they may be sort of dumping or putting into landfill certain hazardous chemicals and the like. So these are some of the emissions. Other things that we might include in the environment, how we're helping the environment perhaps. We've got some tree planting policies, or we've got some water saving. Water's another great one for environment. So interested in saving water. It may be energy as well. So we're looking at and how we use energy. Maybe more energy efficient processes going on in the factory. Okay. What about social kind of things that we might want to report? Any thoughts on that? Community support, yeah. It's all fairly sort of straightforward, this stuff. It's not sort of rocket science. Community. So these might be programs associated with, with helping the community, working with the community as neighbours and the like. Any other thoughts on social? Employee. Well, I heard employee somewhere. Employee welfare policies. Yeah. Sorry? Discrimination? Yeah. These are all sort of social. Yeah. Employee. Okay. So these are sort of all leading into social. Economic. Anybody got any thoughts on economic? Sorry? Financial statements? Yeah. It's fairly straightforward. If you're familiar with a financial report, a lot of the stuff that comes out of here is financial statements. If you're ever interested in learning about a company, and they've got a sustainability report, it's often good to have a look at the sustainability report. They often provide a real good snapshot of what the business does, how it's structured, who does what in the organisation, a brief snapshot of their key financial indicators and financial reports. It's a lot easier to read than trying to work your way through a lot of financial reporting information in the standard annual report. Okay. The difference between a stakeholder and a shareholder. What do you think? A shareholder is one of the stakeholders. Very good. Yeah. A shareholder is a stakeholder. A stakeholder is not necessarily a shareholder. Yeah. So what is a shareholder? Someone who owns the company. Yeah. Take a share in the company, the ownership of the company. They sort of own a slice of the equity in the company. Okay. And just while we're talking about shareholders, who looks after the interests of the shareholders? The what, sorry? The board of directors. Yeah. So the connection between shareholders and the company is board of directors. Okay. And what's the next step in the chain? What's below the board of directors? Management, the executive. Yeah. Okay. So you can see this sort of cascading relationship between each. just while we're talking about it, corporate governance obviously fits around the board of directors. That's primarily their sort of responsibility in terms of corporate governance. And in Australia, if it's an ASX listed company, what sort of controls, or what sort of corporate governance guidelines would they be using? Sorry? Yeah, ASX principles of good corporate governance. Yep. Just on that, if it's not a listed company in the ASX, they may also have some corporate governance guidelines. I mean, some of the government organisations have boards of directors, and they have some guidelines as well that they have to follow. So just because it's not a listed company doesn't mean they don't have guidelines and rules to follow. Okay, now stakeholders. Anybody want to try and explain what a stakeholder is? We'll try someone else. Anybody who hasn't had a go so far? Anybody else up the back here? Stakeholder? Yeah? Anyone who gets involved in the company? Yeah. Consumer? Employee? Okay. Yeah, comes into contact with the. Okay, great, good answer. Yeah, somebody who's interested in what the company does, or has, who may be affected by what the company does. So let's pick out some of those. So you said customers. Yeah, another one. Employees. Yeah, they're stakeholders. Yeah, any more? Supplier. Creditors. Yeah. Yeah. Contractors. Yeah. Okay. Government. Yeah, that's right. Government. So agencies, regulators, and those types of organisations. So they're all stakeholders, not necessarily shareholders, and there's a key difference. So generally, if we go back to the sustainability report, that's written for an audience of stakeholders, tell them what the company's doing, where it's going. But the annual report, the financial report, that's really written for the shareholders. And there's a subtle difference. So the shareholders are interested in that. The sustainability report is not necessarily audited by external auditors, but the annual report is audited by independent external auditors to verify the quality and the accuracy of the information in there. Okay, good. Okay, name 4 common components of a business continuity framework. Anybody want to have a go? Maybe this back corner, or back sort of quarter there. It's the quiet section, I think, up here. Anybody want to have a go? I'm trying to get some answers from these guys up here. So that's all right. I want to have a go. Anybody? What have you got? Don't be shy. Any ideas? Quiet room here. Business continuity framework. What might be included in there? I'll give an example. Well, let's say one may be crisis management. Yeah. So crisis management might be a part of the framework for business continuity. Yeah, so there's a subtle, when we talk about frameworks, frameworks are like umbrellas that cover, we talk about enterprise risk management frameworks which sort of fit across the whole of the process. So crisis management might be one. Anybody else want to have a go? Yeah?
Emergency plans.
Sorry?
Emergency plans.
Emergency plans, I heard, yeah? That's good. Sorry? Plan and training? Yeah, let me just write these down. I'll come back to that. So, okay, so business continuity framework. I mentioned crisis management. There was another one. Did I hear? Disaster DRP. Yeah, disaster recovery. Yeah. Any others? Emergency management. Yeah. Yeah. Any others? Quality. Quality is probably doesn't come under that. Sorry, but good try. Now, one of them is business impact analysis. I don't know if you remember that one, where we look at. Just write that one down. And the other one would be business continuity plan. Okay. So crisis management, just a thought on that. What kind of things might we include or might we want to cover with a crisis management plan? Say, give me an example. Give me a crisis. What kind of example of a crisis, perhaps? Anyone think of one? Sorry? Employees? Oh, I can hear striking. Yeah, a strike. That might be a crisis. Yeah. So when that crisis happens, it's generally a sort of a strategic response that's required by the executive. So the crisis management team is generally a high-level executive group which get together and talk about how they're going to work through that crisis. Remember we talked about those snakes? You've got the slow pythons that come and slowly wrap around you and squeeze you. And the example there was the oil rig up in the North Sea where they mismanaged the Greenpeace guys. They had all the permits in place to put this oil rig on the seabed, but then Greenpeace put a lot of pressure into the communities in Europe, which then put pressure on the organisation to ship that oil rig off to the coast, where it had to be dismantled and turned into scrap steel. And it cost them millions of dollars as a result, and great loss of reputation and issues. The other type of crisis typically is the one that just comes and gets you. That was the cobra. Yeah, that was the cobra one that comes and bites you when you're not least expecting it, or happens very quickly. And so an example of that might be perhaps the other oil issue that we've got down in the Gulf of Mexico, where BP and the rest thought everything was fine, and suddenly, bang, the oil they've got this huge oil spill on their hands, and they're trying to manage that crisis. So that's crisis management. Disaster recovery planning. Now this is a sort of fairly widely sort of used term, but anybody got any thoughts on that? Want to hazard a guess at common usage of disaster recovery plans? I mean, I think of IT. This is where it's probably most used within computer areas. People talk about we've got our DRP, disaster recovery plan. If if our computers blow up, we've got a plan to move our computer processing somewhere else, or we've got backup servers somewhere else, and we can get our systems up and running. So that's great. And people often confuse disaster recovery planning with business continuity. So I've been into organisations and they've said, "Oh yeah, we've got a disaster recovery plan. It's all sorted." And you go and ask them, you go, "Well, yeah, that computer centre there, we've got a backup computer centre, in another building somewhere, and that's all covered." But what they haven't done is they haven't looked at the business processes and how critical those business processes are. And really, you need to know how long you can go without a business process before you can start planning as to how to back up your computer systems. To give you an example, one organisation I was working with, their disaster recovery plan said, "Oh yeah, we've got that all in place, and it's going to take 48 hours to recover the systems and get them up and running again." And we spoke to the business side of it, and they said, "Well, we run a call centre. We need the computer systems up and running within about 4 hours." So this difference between what the disaster recovery plan was about to do with 48 hours and what the business need was very different, and something that we had to sort of come up with some other strategies. We had to improve the disaster recovery plan on the IT systems and make sure that the business need was met. Which kind of leads us on to jumping ahead, actually, to the business impact analysis. And that business impact analysis is really going through those business processes, working out which are the critical ones, which can we can afford to switch off or not have working for a length of period, which are the ones that are so critical that we need to keep those working, and then develop some contingency plans off the back of that, which is then fitted into our business continuity plan. And our business continuity plan says, okay, in the event of this computer failure, we're going to send a message out on our call centre staff to say, "I'm sorry, we're out of business, can you please call back tomorrow," perhaps. That's the plan. And then in the meantime, we're busy setting up the computer systems elsewhere, or we're writing notes down on a paper basis, and then later we get other people to try and put those notes back into the computer system when it's up and running. So we have a bit of a plan as how to kind of reduce the impact of these outages. The other one there, emergency management, really that's all about flashing lights and saving lives. So how are you going to manage the fire brigade coming on site? How are you going to manage if there's an injury, an accident? How are you going to manage if there's a police incident, there's a sort of a white powder incident, a fire, water leakage, those types of immediate life-threatening type issues. Generally what happens is you have a fire, you have the emergency plan, managing that, and then if it's a major fire, then you would get your crisis management team together to think about what impact is this fire going to have on our businesses, how are we going to manage our customers and their orders, how are we going to manage our suppliers, manage our staff, and all of those types of things. So hopefully that you can sort of see how this all sort of fits together. Okay. What does a captive insurance company do? Anybody want to have a go at that one? It's a little bit of a curly one. I'm not sure if I may have mentioned captives once, very briefly. Everyone's checking on their iPhone, has got it hooked up to Google or something. You're not allowed those in the exam, I don't think. So, but it's open book, so I don't know. Anybody want to have a hazard a guess? Maybe captive insurance company. Sorry? An in-house? Yeah, it is. It's an in-house insurance company for large corporations. So if you're a multi-million-dollar corporation, You don't want to just send all your insurance premium money straight out to the insurance market, to those first insurers. So what you often do is you set up another company. So most large corporations are made up of lots of companies and different entities, and this is just another one. And what it means is that as an insurance company, you can get direct access to reinsurance companies. Now, reinsurance companies are just giant insurance companies. The only difference is that their customers are other insurance companies. So let me sort of give you a bit of a handle on that. I think if I'm sort of take it, I'm an individual or a small business, and I'm buying insurance. So let's call this a small business. And I want to buy some insurance. I'm probably going to go to my local broker. And I say to my broker, hey, look, this is how much my business is worth. What do you think? And he'll probably have a look around and go, oh, well, look, you need some liability, and you need some property protection, you need some workers' compensation insurance. You've got some machines there, so you probably should have some boiler machinery cover, and he'll sort of give you some guidance as to what type of insurance to buy. And then he'll go to the market and have a chat with several insurance companies. Okay, and so they have relationships with multiple insurance companies. And some insurance companies specialize in sort of property protection. Others specialize in liability, and so he'll find the best deal for you in those different markets. And then generally what happens is these insurance companies, they might sell you an insurance policy for like insuring $10 million worth of property, say, but they don't want to take all that risk on themselves. If your factory burns down, they don't want to pay out $10 million. So what they'll do is they'll say, right, we'll pay out maybe the first $1 million, but we'll buy some insurance. Actually, we'll go out and buy some insurance to cover ourselves if that happens. So insurance companies then buy insurance, and typically they buy insurance from reinsurers. So you get the sort of these sort of linkages, going on across the market for all the different types of insurance that is being bought. So the effect that this has is actually spreads the risk across many different organisations, and so that if there is a major loss, it's unlikely that one insurance company will sort of lose everything, and they can spread it around. So that's the sort of typical structure often for small businesses. Now with large businesses, you might have let's call it lots of people being insured. Now generally they might have then an insurance manager. So this is a guy who is employed by that large business, and his whole job is to manage the insurance for the company. Right? That's what he does all day long, looking after claims and looking after policy coverages, and if there's a factory extension, make sure that increased asset is covered by insurance, and helping with sort of managing insurable insurance risk. Then often they'll go to this captive insurance company. All right. So this captive insurance, so all of this lot is all owned, if you like, by that single large business. And that captive insurance company operates in the same way as any other insurance company. And as a result, they can then share their risk potentially against multiple reinsurers. Okay. Now, generally, the limits. I mean, if we were to sort of think about sort of limits across here, it may be that this is a sort of anything over, let's say 10 million, and here we might say 50,000, and something similar here. And then something similar here. So the situation is sort of similar, except the large organisation can kind of shortcut going to the direct insurers. They can put all their sort of their premiums into their into their captive insurance company. Now there's some tax benefits associated with that. In America and Europe, there's tax havens where they put these captive insurance companies. So that premiums can flow into these captives, and if they don't have any claims, they can sit there and earn tax-free interest. And there's some benefits associated with that. Governments around the world are catching up with all of that now, and it's a lot more difficult to do. But still, to set up a captive is a great way to increase your power within the market. And also, if you've got some good risk management processes in place which reduce the amount of losses that you incur generally, maybe to a level which is below the industry average, you can save yourself a lot of money, because effectively anything that goes into the captive in terms of premiums will stay within the whole organisation. So you can reduce the amount of spend on insurance generally. So that's really what a captive does. And it's a pretty crappy diagram, but yeah. How's the reinsurer going to survive? Well, that's a good question. I mean, reinsurance companies are really interesting organisations. They have a very long-term perspective on what they do, and some of the best research that comes out of the impact of global warming and sea level rises and these sorts of things are going to impact reinsurance companies in a big way. Hailstone sizes, these sorts of things. So they spend a lot of time and have an awful lot of specialists looking at these types of risk issues. But there's always a chance that they get it wrong and wipe themselves out. And there have been sort of situations with, we've seen Hurricane Katrina. That was one huge, great loss, impacted the reinsurance market very heavily, but have managed to survive. I think other sort of issues are that the market's very cyclical. So they have a Hurricane Katrina and they almost lose their shirts. So then they go, let's put premiums up. So premiums start going up and the market prices start rising. They pull money in. They also have a lot of assets, a lot of big asset base, and they can generate some interest income or sort of earnings from those assets and sort of investments and the like. So generally they're very big, stable organisations. What was interesting in the GFC was that AIG, who does a lot of reinsurance as well, got it wrong. They were buying these CFDs or some of these sort of funny assets that were floating around, and or were insuring against those things, and basically lost a lot of money when that all went belly up. So they do get it wrong sometimes. But the size of these reinsurance companies, Swiss Re, Munich Re, some of them jump into my mind. There's XL Re. There's a few others out there too. So great place to get a job. Nice long-term prospects there. So yeah. What's the difference between a hazard and a risk? Yeah.
Can captive insurance have access to insurance?
Can captives have access to?
They access
the co-insurance market.
Yeah, can it co-insure versus without insurance?
There's potential for that. It's fairly rare because what happens, there's a term called fronting insurance, the front company. Generally, when you pay a premium, you only want to pay a premium to one company, right? And if you're a co-insurer, you don't know who to pay the premium to. Right? So generally, co-insurers happen behind the fronting company. So there's one insurance company which receives all the premium and effectively writes the policy and issues the policy, and then they will then split off sort of co-insurance deals with another layer of insurers behind that. So to answer your question, probably no, you wouldn't co-insure as a captive. You would front and then push the co-insurance somewhere else. What happens? You might front it, and then you take 50% of it, but then you reinsure the other 50%. So it's kind of co-insuring, but depends how you look at it. But yeah, but generally there's only one. You need one company to issue the policy, and that's generally the way to go. So any other thoughts on captives and structure of small business? I mean, some large companies bypass their captives and go straight to the market if there's a better deal around, if insurance is cheap. But that's a fairly common thing to see. So, difference between a hazard and a risk. Anybody want to hazard a guess? Hazard is leads to a risk, or yeah, it's something that is the source of risk in some ways, if you like. Yeah, I mean, one easy way to remember it is you can generally sort of hazards are sort of things that you can touch, pretty much. You know, this table in the way could be it's a hazard. I will sort of hurt myself on it and I walk past. But the risk is that as I'm walking past, I hit it, and that results in me being hurt, and that's the risk. So when you're thinking about sort of the difference between hazards and risks, a risk is generally best described as a hazard leading to a consequence of some sort. So risk or actually leading to an event is probably the best way to say it, event, and then resulting in a consequence. Okay, so I think there's a definition a little bit like that in the HB guide, but generally, if you're in the exam and you're describing a risk, the best way to describe it is in something in those terms. So, table in the walkway leading to an injury, or and then resulting in lots of pain and anguish and suing Deakin for damages. So that's a sort of way to sort of think about it. So if you can think of risks in those parts, that'll help you a lot, I think, in the way that you're sort of that you're working, sort of talking about risks. So hazards, hazard would be table in the walkway kind of thing, or loose electrical cables or live electrical equipment. That's in the present. We can see it, we can touch it. Risks actually are something that hasn't happened yet that can occur in the future. Does that make sense? Okay. Sorry? Risks as opportunities. It's always a difficult question, isn't it? But It's a good question. Risk is opportunity. It's in a lot of the documentation that talks about risk, they talk about opportunity and downside risks. I've looked at this in many ways. Personally, I'm not convinced that risk management is the best way to identify opportunities necessarily, but it's one way to do it. I mean, this is fairly simplistic. It's the same approach as your normal risk matrix. So you might have likelihood. So high likelihood, low likelihood. So you can grade your opportunities in the same way that you would grade your consequences, and effectively look at how good is this opportunity and how likely that opportunity is of occurring. And it's a bit like a mirror image of what you do in sort of downside risk management. That's one way of tackling it. To be honest, from my experience, I haven't seen many people try and use this. I've seen it, but it's never really caught on. I think a better way of doing it is to think about there are literally millions and billions of opportunities everywhere around us. Our challenge is firstly to identify those opportunities, and secondly to rate those opportunities in terms of how those opportunities will take us and help us achieve our objectives. And there's a good book called Risk Intelligence by David Apgar. I think it may be on the reading list. And if you're interested to sort of look at opportunities and opportunity management and the risk of sort of rating those different opportunities, that's probably one of the best books that I've come across to try and manage opportunity risk. You may see other things where people are using mirror images of matrices and things, but I haven't had much success from those. So it's not a good answer, but hopefully a little insight into the problems that we have in risk management. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on defining risks and hazards? Yeah. Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back. And I've got a few other questions for you. See how we go with those. Okay.
Just want to thank you, Brian.
Okay, I hope the more observant of you have noticed I've actually changed the slide during the break and put a few more questions and anybody still working on these? Anybody started working on them? Okay. So hopefully now just spend a couple of minutes putting a few thoughts down as to how you might answer these. So these may be sort of exam type questions, all right? And I'm just sort of want to get you thinking a little bit about the types of ways you'd have to be thinking in the exam. Last week we talked a little bit about some case study stuff. I can see quite a few people still sort of writing, so I might give you guys just another couple of minutes. Okay, so let's have a look at what does the term "if not, why not" mean in relation to ASX principles of good corporate governance. We talked a little bit about corporate governance before and the relations between boards of directors and shareholders. Anybody want to have a hazard a guess? Any ideas? Sort of, yeah. I mean, you're sort of kind of on the right tracks. Is it to do with agency theory? It is. It is to do with that. It's probably something a little bit more specific than that. Has anybody actually come across this? I think I may have mentioned this in one of the lectures. Yeah.
I think it puts the emphasis on the fact that while the the mandatory for
That's right. That's right. Okay, I just want to repeat it so we can get it on the mic. What he said was that the ASX principles of good corporate governance are not mandatory. Because they're not mandatory, there's no laws broken if they're not complied with. But the expectation is in the annual report to say, well, if you're not complying with these principles, why not? If not, why not? So there's an expectation in the annual report, in the governance section or the corporate governance section of the annual report, to say for companies to explain, hey, why don't we have a risk management process or policy, or why don't we have a remuneration committee, or why are we not complying with any of the other principles of good corporate governance? So this is sort of part of it, and it comes back to this issue that should corporate governance be a rule, a regulation? Should it be part of law, or or should it be left to the organisation to sort of self-govern, come up with the self? So this is sort of like the happy medium, if you like, to say, well, look, we're not going to force you to do it, because if we did force you to do it, the chances are that you probably just do the absolute minimum, and you just do the minimum and give it a bit of lip service, so you put a tick in a box. And that's not really why we want you to do this. So it's sort of like, we trust you guys, but please explain why not. And if you check out the principles, I think that part is in there. What about the term material risk? Has anybody come across this in any of the readings, or any of the sort of work that you've done, perhaps? I think it was mentioned one of the other weeks. Has anybody got any thoughts? Material, yeah?
Material risk from quality.
Okay. Yeah.
The company has many risks.
Yeah.
Some risks which is more important than others, and the material risks are the ones that. Material risks are the ones that you would want to treat and look at, because they're going to impact your company in a way which negatively, if it happens, so you want to really care about it.
Yeah, so that's a great way of describing it. Yeah, it's risks that we care about. Is it material? Is it worth thinking about? Is it worth sort of looking any further, into this? So this is maybe a term. It's a bit of a sort of how can you say, executive speak or consultant type speak term, but it's gaining popularity. I'm hearing it more and more. Material risks. Is it material? Is it significant to what we're doing? All right. How might balanced scorecards be used in an enterprise risk management process? Anybody got any thoughts on that? Can I give somebody else a chance? Somebody else here who hasn't said anything, perhaps? Any thoughts? Balanced scorecards. Anybody? Okay, let's look at it a slightly different way. What's the what is a balanced scorecard? What's the purpose? What are we trying to do with balanced scorecards? Guys, any thoughts? I know you know the answer, so I can ask you. Balanced scorecards. What's the purpose of a balanced scorecard? Let's just take one step back for a second. Not sure. Not sure. Anybody else? We talked about it last week. Another minute. Anybody else want to have a go at balanced scorecards? I know everyone down the front is probably sort of chomping at the bit. Trying to get some. What was on a balanced scorecard? We talked about it last week. What some of the parts? Four perspectives. Yeah, there's 4 perspectives in the balanced scorecard. Yeah. How you're measuring performance. Yeah. Objectives. Yeah. So it's about objectives. Yeah. So balanced scorecards. You remember? I don't know if I've still got a slide sitting in my. Yeah. See. Yeah, I didn't. Here we go. Let's get the lights on. So balanced scorecards, 4 different perspectives of an organisation. These perspectives, just start ringing a few bells now, all associated with achieving the vision and strategy of the organisation. So these are all about objectives. What are our objectives? Okay. So, anybody see the link between balanced scorecards and enterprise risk management? It's probably one key word that links the two together. Strategic planning process? That's more than one word. I'm looking for one word that links the two together. See if you can. Integration? No.
The balanced scorecards focus on the objective, and the enterprise management, I think, balanced scorecard is an object. And what's the risk involved with objective?
Exactly. So balanced scorecard is all about objectives. You can see up here, this is all about objectives of the organisation. Well done. Right. So we're talking about objectives here. The definition of risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. Okay, so that's the linkage. And so, if we've got an enterprise risk management framework, obviously we're going to be interested in risks. If we're interested in risks, we're going to be interested in objectives. So we can look at the risks associated with achieving those objectives. So that's really, the linkage between the two. So if we're going to develop an effective enterprise risk management process, we need to know what our objectives are. This helps us define and document our objectives. So it's a great tool to link in with the enterprise risk management process. So hopefully you can start to see these kind of links coming together, and the key word there is objectives. So okay. So how might balanced scorecards be used in the enterprise risk management process? Well, they're there really to assist the definition or the identification of objectives, and then we can use that to help us identify risk. We can't identify risks unless we know what our objectives are. Now hopefully the next one you might have an idea on, associated with assignment 1. Name 4 ways to treat or control risks. Anybody want to have a guess? Maybe I should write some of these down. I mean, just call out any way of controlling a risk. Transfer, yeah.
Insure.
Transfer. I'm just going to write whatever you call out. Insure. Share.
Eliminate.
Eliminate, yeah. Yeah.
Partially accept.
Partially accept. I'll write that down. Okay. Anyone else? Any more? Let's put this thing in. These lights keep switching down automatically. So. Okay. Transfer, insure, share, eliminate, partially accept. Any more? Enterprise risk management package. That covers everything, doesn't it? No, that might be a little bit too too general. So you're on the right track, though. Yeah. Reduce. I mean, yeah. Treat. Reduce. I don't know. Let's see. Right, so going down again. Let's see. Okay. Okay. All right. Now this slide that I've just put up is a slide in one of the earlier lectures. And let me get a bit bigger. What it's showing us is the effective controls, which is sort of a form of treatment, risk treatment on the risk. And this is an area that most risk management activity, if you like, is associated with. Hey, look, we've identified this risk in our organisation. We're not happy with it. We want to reduce this risk. Another word is mitigate this risk. And there's some sort of, I suppose, there's some groups that we can sort of think about in how we get a risk reduced. And it may be a reduction in likelihood. It may be a reduction in consequence. I mean, to give an example, we talked about this risk of this table sort of being here. I hit the table and hurt myself, and I end up suing Deakin for lots of money. If I was to reduce the likelihood of that risk, how might I do that? Anybody any thoughts? Avoid coming into the room. Yeah, lock the room off. Don't let anybody in. Yeah, that's one way. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me. I'll just write. That's a good point. I'll come back to that. Okay. Yep. So you have. Yep. Let me just. Okay. So I'll come back to that point. I just want to sort of demonstrate. Just go through it. So to reduce the likelihood of sort of the event of sort of coming into contact with the hazard. We talked about locking the room off. Anything else? Any other? Sorry? Remove the table. Yeah, we could remove the table. That's going to reduce. Put it somewhere else. and then maybe that's a place no one goes to or no one walks past. That's a lot safer. Yeah, we could sort of put flashing lights around it or something, or educate people to make sure when you come into this room, follow the little yellow lines and make sure you don't hit the table. So these are all about reducing the likelihood. What about the consequence? How could I reduce the consequence of the risk? Any thoughts on that? Now, thinking that risk is obviously a function of likelihood and consequence. So, to reduce a risk, I can either reduce the likelihood or I could reduce the consequence. So how could I reduce the consequence of this risk, me walking into the table, hurting myself and suing Deakin? Having warning signs? That's probably a likelihood issue. Yeah. Yeah. So thinking about the consequence of the event. You could. That comes back to your other point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's all right. Let go of that just for a second. Yeah. Yeah.
With the legislation, risk transfer, you can actually get each deacon student to sign something like it.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it. Yeah, you could sort of reduce the consequence of having people sign off some kind of thing to say, "I will not sue." So I promise, and I accept all the risks, all the hazards around Deakin, and I promise never to sue Deakin. It may work, it may not. I don't know. I mean, you could put sort of nice sort of soft cushions around it, things like that, so that or a nice crash mat down there. So when I do walk into it, I don't hurt myself, and if I do fall over, then I don't get so badly injured. So that would be a way of reducing the consequence. So hopefully you can understand that there's often sort of likelihood and consequences are sort of two different things we can work on. Then, I guess these are sort of four common sort of strategies for looking at controls or reducing risk or treating risk. Risk retention, meaning we're kind of accepting that, and in this case I put funded or unfunded. Now this may be we put a bit of money aside. So that Deakin has identified that these tables are a real problem, and at some point someone's going to come along and hurt themselves and sue Deakin, and we're going to put some money aside for when that happens. That's our fund. It may be that we say, well, look, we're just going to accept that risk, and we're not going to put any money aside, and if it happens, well, we just have to take it. We just have to take it off our profits for the year, and that's just the way we're going to manage that risk. So we're not really going to sort of change anything. We're going to accept that risk. Risk transfer, it's contractual, insurance, capital markets. So contractual, it may be that Deakin was to say the management of all our lecture halls is going to be done by a third party, right? And so if anything happens within the lecture hall, it's not our problem. We've got a contractor doing all that for us. And if you've got if you've hurt yourself in that lecture area, then go and talk to the contractors. You'll have to claim off their insurance. So we move that risk away and move it to a third party or contractor. Insurance, we might that would be associated with our liability insurance. So we'd have insurance cover that I hurt myself, I sue, then we claim that on the Deakin insurance policy. Capital markets is not really sort of part here, but it's not sort of really that relevant here, but it's more of a financial risk transfer option. Sorry? Hedging, yeah. In terms of risk control reduction, here management, procedural, behavioural, physical. Really what we're interested there doing is, that's sort of start looking at management. It may be that, we have a process to come in here and do inspections to check that there's no obstructions in walkways and there's no hazards around, and we look after that, and we've got a health and safety team that go around and keep track of hazard reductions and take responsibility for that. It may be there's procedures, you know, so that we've got little yellow lines everywhere, and the policy and procedures say that whenever you're walking, you have to be walking within the yellow lines. Behavioural, it may be about sort of trying to change the culture of the organisation to one that doesn't leave stuff lying all around, and that when they're finished, you know, everything goes back into its place, and you know, it's a culture of managing the risk and avoiding hazards. Physical protection, well, that comes back to the cushions. You know, some nice cushions and crash mats around to help reduce the risk. Business change, substitution, elimination. Well, these are sort of common in areas. Perhaps I think I talked to you about an example of. I talked to you about the site, which was molasses. They had these big tanks of molasses next to the river. There's a big risk that if these tanks leaked, they would kill all the fish and the wildlife in the river. And as a result, that business actually sold the molasses business out of their. They got rid of that part of their. I mean, molasses was one small part of their operations, and they sold that on to someone else, and effectively eliminated the risk of the molasses going into the river. Substitution, that's an example of say, well, I mean, a good example, say car manufacturers used to use a lot of flammable paints and when they're painting their cars, and there's a big fire risks and very sort of all sorts of environmental issues with solvents going into the air. They've got sort of health and safety issues with exposure to people. And so they found some technology which would replace solvent-based paints with water-based paints. So effectively they substituted water-based paints and managed to reduce or eliminate the risk of the solvents associated with the painting process. So these are some examples of how we can control risks. So now your question was about inherent and accepting the risks. Really, that sort of comes down to that first one, risk retention. There are, you know, certain levels of risk that we look at and we go, oh look, this is a serious risk for us, but you know, it's uncomfortable, but we accept it because it's the business we're in. And that's a risk appetite decision as well. I mean, all of this is risk appetite decision.
So, for example, a hospital, by the very nature of treating patients, is risky.
Yep.
So they have to accept that one injury in terms of error results in harm, which could be very serious.
Yep.
But they can't close the doors if people need to be treated.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that kind of thing, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just to paraphrase that, you're saying that hospitals, in what they do, people die, you know, in hospitals. I mean, it could be through sort of the fact that we can't save them. It could be the fact that we haven't got enough money to save them. It could be the fact that we make a mistake and they die. So, you know, these are risks associated with medical and hospital operations. In terms of risk management, you know, I guess, you know, we do the best we can with the funding that's available, but we do accept that, you know, people will die. And if we have a sort of an objective to sort of have everybody that comes into the hospital alive leave the hospital alive, well, that's probably not a very realistic objective. So these are some of the challenges that we face through hospitals, and it's a difficult job. But having said that, you know, for sort of malpractice type issues, you know, monitoring or having procedures in place, having management procedures or management of the risks, procedures to make sure that you know, people get the right dose of medication. That's all signed off, and that there's no sort of overdosing or misdiagnosis. Behavioural, you know, this is associated with, you know, I mean, one of the interesting ones in medical is there's these super bugs around, and once they get into the hospital, they're very difficult to get rid of. And so a lot of them, they've discovered that the ties of consultants walk around with some of the doctors have got ties on. Often that's where the bugs, reside, because ties don't generally get washed in the same way as everything else. So behavioural issues, it's like, well, we're not going to wear ties anymore, or these security tags that everyone has hanging around their neck. As you're leaning over someone, that touches the wound or something, and then they go around somewhere else, and then that touches. So these risks. So it's behavioural issues. The fact that we're not going to wear these security tags, so we're going to have a different type of security tag, and that can be sanitised, and identifying where these risk issues are appearing, and that may change the way people behave. So we have to change that. So yeah, there's always opportunity to improve too. Yeah. That's a good. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So the behaviour issue is not a good one. I mean, we can talk a lot more about this, but hospital doctors and how they respond, and the reporting of bad news. This is a big issue for companies. That they have a culture of not reporting bad news up. Airlines have, or pilots in aeroplanes have a big issue with a culture where the captain's got thousands and thousands of hours, and the co-pilot sits next door. Co-pilot thinks, hey, look, something's not quite right here. We shouldn't break the rules. The senior pilot says, yeah, let's just go. There was an example where there was two 747s collided on a runway in Europe, going back quite a few years, and there was the senior pilot set up for takeoff, and it was foggy. They couldn't see the whole runway. They hadn't been given clearance to take off, but they were in a hurry. Their hours were limited, and the senior pilot said, "Yeah, let's go," and told the co-pilot to, and the co-pilot said, "Hey, look, we haven't got clearance, from air traffic control." And the co-pilot says, "Yep, don't worry." Or the senior pilot said, "Don't worry, let's go." And he took off. So they took off, and at the same time they took off, there was another 747 crossing the runway, and they collided. And so this was a cultural issue that the co-pilot didn't sort of feel confidence to say, "Stop, I'm not going to let this plane take off, even though you're a very senior pilot. I'm not." So there was a cultural issue about how these two pilots were interacting, and then that was something that was obviously learned by the crash investigators. And so the way that the two pilots interact is very important in terms of managing risk and behavioural issues. Digressing a little bit as I get back to the exam. Okay. Yeah. Professional conduct. Okay. How do you manage professional conduct type risks? Okay. Are you thinking of an example of that? Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the behavioural issues associated with one doctor, disagreeing with another doctor, and how that would be. Okay, I mean, often I guess the level of proficiency in a doctor's work. How do you manage doctors? How do you check up that they're not? I mean, this is a whole big area that you're talking. How do you manage the performance of doctors? It's a very good question. There's some issues that have come up with. You find out that there's Dr. Death, and that he's got sort of an unusual number of deaths of old paint. There was one in the UK where there was a lot of old people who died, and it was only when his statistics were looked at that there was a spike in his statistics compared with other people. But it comes back. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it comes back to sort of performance management, key risk indicators. So that if you've identified, performance management as a risk, how would you measure that, and how would you report that? How would you track it? How would you see how you're going month to month? So there's a key risk indicator associated with that. That's probably the way I would sort of attack that. Yeah. Okay. So that's treating and controlling risks. Okay, last one. Apple released the iPad this year. Name an insurable and uninsurable risk that Apple would have faced with this new product launch. Anybody want to have a go at? How many people are going to buy an iPad here? Anybody? No? I think they're being launched tomorrow or something, aren't they? Yeah? Sorry? 28. Wednesday. Tomorrow? Yeah. You going to buy one? No? Okay. So you're Apple, you're about to launch the iPad. You're doing a quick risk review of the launch. What kind of risks might you identify with your product launch? Let's write a few of these down. Hopefully we get a few risks out here. I haven't prepared, and there's no sort of certain answer for this. But, any iPad market acceptance. Okay. We won't do the full risk sort of, Sorry? Quality. Warranty, yeah. So market acceptance. Warranty. Yeah. Reputation. Okay. I'll come back to you on that one. It's a good put a little asterisk next to that one. Copyright. Okay. Yeah. Quality control. Yeah. Logistics. Yeah. Okay. Performance. Okay. All right. Now, if we were in an exam situation and you're coming up with these risks, probably, how we talked about a hazard. Leading to an event resulting in consequence. All right. For the exam, if you're asked to, describe a risk, this is the format that I'd like you to try and put it into. Okay. So let's take that first one, market acceptance. How might we describe that in terms of hazard leading to an event resulting in some kind of consequence? Anybody have any thoughts? People may not accept the product. Yeah. Okay. So how might we describe that? Something leading to, resulting in.
Sales backlog.
Sorry?
Sales backlog.
Sales backlog. Yeah, that's not market acceptance. That's more of an operational thing, I think. But that's another. That is a good risk. Sorry? You can't touch it yet. Yeah. So I'm just. So really we're looking at a lack of market acceptance, right? So the market fails to accept, yeah. Okay. Now what would cause the market to fail to accept the product? Why?
Maybe it's a luxury product because everyone already has laptop, so I think they will go for it.
Yeah, people. So maybe everyone's got a laptop already. So what's that, market saturation, you think? But what's the cause? When you go back to, hey, look, they didn't accept our product. Why? Because the feature's not enough. Yeah, another comment.
Prices going higher than the market goes.
Okay, so features, price. Yeah, another one. Yeah. Design. Okay. Quality. Okay.
Product life cycle, in fact, got a higher fallout.
Possibly. It's too new. Yeah. Okay. So you can kind of see where we're going with this. You know, what's the reason to cause market acceptance or failure of market acceptance? And so if we were doing a risk management workshop with Apple, this is sort of some of the discussions we would sort of go through. And it may be that after discussion, people go, well, look, I think our biggest risk is the fact that the market might not be mature enough, perhaps, right? A lack of the market's not ready, right? So we say the risk would be fail to identify customers' needs. Yeah, but I mean, what's driving that? So what is? I want to sort of kind of like get below that surface somewhere. So it may be. I'm just saying.
They haven't committed the battery to keep it alive long enough.
Yeah. So performance. So sort of lack of performance. Let's just say lack of performance or something like that. Failure to live up to performance or to perform. Failure to perform to expectation leads to market. We'll call it market rejection. Okay, so the market rejects this product, resulting in poor sales and losses. Okay, so you kind of see where we're getting. So we started off with the thought of market acceptance. Now that is it's a very valid thing, but when we're talking about describing a risk, we want to think about, well, what's the hazard? The hazard is its failure to perform, which is something in the present. Okay, resulting in a consequence. Well, the consequence is the market rejects it, and then as a result, it leads to an event. The event is the market rejection, and then the consequence is the poor sales and losses associated with it. Okay, so that's the sort of description of risk that we'd like to see if you're asked to describe a risk. So it has those three components. And it's got to make sense. It's got to be connected to the question. So this is one of the challenges of the exam that's sort of case study based. It's not something that we just pull up out of our notes. Okay. Now there was the original question was about an insurable risk. I'm thinking, anybody think of an insurable risk for the iPad release? Something that Apple would be able to insure against, perhaps. I'm not going to go to the big definition again, but just the topic, what might be insurable associated with the release. Theft, breakage, yeah. You know, they've got all their iPads sitting in a warehouse. Someone comes and steals them, or it burns down. That would be an insurable risk associated with the launch. Any others? Yeah. Logistics. A little bit more specific. Anything? Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So you're shipping the iPads from America or wherever they're coming from, China, and they get lost en route. Yep. That would be a marine type or transport insurable claim. Yep. So that's good. Okay. So you get the picture. Another one would be potentially product recall. If someone talks about the batteries not being long enough. Maybe the batteries start exploding and catching fire, and we've got some liabilities associated with iPads, you know, setting fire to things, blowing up in front of people, and then we have to do a product recall. Now, often it's covered by insurance. The costs of gathering all those back up again, providing people with alternative products, or giving them the money back, and those types of things. It's quite a big big exercise of product recall. So these are sort of insurable sort of risks. Anybody want to talk about uninsurable risks? I mean, we've covered one already with the failure to perform to expectations, market rejection. Well, you can't insure against that sort of loss of reputation, if you like, in the market. Now that leads me back to your point about reputation. I think you mentioned reputation. That was raised last week. It's an interesting topic. Is reputation a risk in itself, or is it purely a consequence? And my take on that is reputation generally is a consequence. There's many things that lead to a loss of reputation. So reputation in itself is not necessarily the risk. It's purely a consequence. So for example, if the performance, the lack of performance of the computer, results in a lack of a damaged reputation for Apple. And there's lots of things that potentially might cause a loss of reputation or damage, or maybe increased reputation. But generally, I think of reputation as a consequence, and if that's the case, then we have to think back and say, well, what's the event and what's the hazard associated with that consequence? Okay. Any competition? Is competition an uninsurable risk?
Is competition really down acceptance because people rather than intentions to substitute?
Most definitely, it's an uninsurable risk. I mean, it would be great to be able to insure, you bring a new product out and you could insure your acceptance into the market. I say, well, if this product doesn't work, then I'll just claim on my insurance policy. I don't think there'd be too many insurers who'd be happy to take on that risk. So loss of market share is definitely uninsurable risk. I mean, this is perhaps a little twist associated with the topic. You have insurable risks, like that factory burns down. So the iPods are all sitting in the warehouse, that's all burnt to the ground. And then there's a story in the newspaper the next day that says, iPad, gone up in smoke. And they've got this big press presentation, and they haven't got any iPads to sell. So people go, stupid Apple, I'm not going to buy one of these things now. And there's a competitor product which is about to be released about the same time, and people go, I'll buy that one instead now because I can get that. It's very difficult to get the market share back. So that's an uninsurable risk associated with an insurable event. Yeah, subtle difference. Okay, all right. Let's take another short break. Give my voice a rest, and we'll come back with some final tips. If you've got any questions about exam preparation, come up and ask me now, and I'll note them down, and then I can kind of like go through those with everybody. Okay, thanks. Okay, hopefully you've had a little break. I'll keep going because I know you're keen to get home. It's been a long night. You covered a fair bit of stuff. Okay, I'll just go through some of the questions that people have asked me, and the reason I just wanted to share the answer with everybody, so it's not fair, not unfair to some and not fair to others. So someone asked me, do I have to read all the online readings and the required readings? I think he said I'm up to topic number 5 now in the readings. I said I'm hoping that I would have hoped that you would have paced yourself through the readings. There are a lot of readings, and I think that's something I said at the beginning of the unit. What I would suggest is, yes, try and at least take a look at all the readings, particularly the required reading. Have a go at some of the questions if you haven't already done that in the topic guide. There's questions and answers provided. Don't look at the answers before you try the question yourself, unless you're really stuck. I think I was saying to somebody, what I would suggest you do is look at those readings and go through them and just make some notes as to what you think are the important points or important topics, and give yourself the option of tracking back to them and knowing where those points are, so that when you even in the exam you've got your own notes. By having done the notes, you'll probably help you remember things just by sort of writing some notes out, some brief notes, and then you can quickly refer to your notes. It'll make more sense to you than trying to leaf through some papers or documents that you're not that familiar with. Try and find some issues. So it's all about managing your time and saving time. One thing that I would, works for me. I've got a bit of a sort of disjointed brain, or kind of creative or picture-based brain. And that's a mind map. I don't know if any of you have had a go at doing mind maps before. What it is really, it's a great way, with assignments and trying to link all these things together. So if I was to write down, say, in the middle, let's try. Is this on? No. Okay, if I was to sort of start in the middle with enterprise risk management, what's associated with enterprise risk management? Anybody will? Something, somewhere, I hope. Risk. Okay. Risk. Okay. Another one. Objectives. So with objectives, we can link that to risk, and we can probably link that into here as well. Yeah. Enterprise risk management. What else? Framework tools. Yeah. Yeah. Framework. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Benchmarking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll link that to framework, perhaps. Yeah. Sorry? Risk management processes. Yep. So we can link that with there. Then we can probably sort of link it to enterprise risk if we want to. You can see how this is starting to come together. So risk process, I'll just, you can try this for yourselves. Risk process, ISO 31000, say, okay. And then that's going to link into other, risk as well, objectives. Let's say risk definition. We've got corporate governance over here. Okay. We've got ASX. We've got agency theory. Yeah, and so, I mean, don't feel like you've got to copy this down exactly. I would just, take a moment to yourself, start off with a big piece of paper even, and then just start sort of brainstorming all these issues and just seeing how it all connects together. So that, if you're in the exam and there's a question about risk process, say, comes up, you go, okay, risk process, what's associated with risk process? And already you're going to start thinking, oh, well, that's kind of ISO 31000, that's risk process, and that's sort of linking into the definition of risk perhaps, or linking into enterprise risk management. And so you can kind of think about how these things connect and link together. So they're not just, it's almost like this silo thing. We're not thinking in silos, we're thinking in an interconnected topic. The more you sort of think about how these things connect, then the easier I think you'll find answering the questions. So hopefully that's a sort of a useful tool for some of you. Perhaps maybe others it's like, oh, just give me my notes. I know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to tell you what to do. Another one was topics to study. What do we? I remember last year someone came up to me, what do I have to learn to pass the exam? I think I had somebody else say, what's in the exam? But yeah, you can imagine. Some people try it on, What I put together, this is something I put together last year. Now I warn you that there may be some things which are not up to date, but it's still pretty relevant, and so we'll just go through this. I said most of these papers, including the topic guide online, but not printed or with references to lecture notes. There's a few new ones I found that might help you with revision, maybe assignment too. But so this is from last year. You may have found some papers references in your own research. This is just the guide to help you with revision. So last year, the lecture notes have changed since last year. We've rewritten the study guide. So the real option stuff is out. But still, what's in the study guide should hopefully give you a head start. So if you're looking for the absolute minimum, read the study guide at least. I'm not going to guarantee that's going to get you a pass, but it might help. Be familiar with the ASX corporate governance principles and recommendations. Get yourself a copy of that because really that encapsulates all the corporate governance issues and sort of material that we covered. 436, HB 436, that was a sort of a required text, ISO 31000. Either ISO 31000 or HB 436, hopefully you've got a copy of that already. It's a useful reference. I can't remember everything about the standard. If somebody says, what are all the parts of the process, I can't always remember those, but I can usually sort of look it up pretty quickly. ISO 31000, that's now available through the library. Thanks very much for somebody who gave us the link to that. Again, that's a useful reference. The Horwath corporate governance reports, those are actually I find those very useful, particularly the introductory section where it's talking about how they did the benchmarking surveys, and it gives you an insight into how companies are actually responding to the ASX corporate governance principles and recommendations. And so, that's probably an easier read than looking at the ASX documents, and probably make more sense. McKinsey Global Investor Opinion Survey. That was something we covered last year. It's not really that relevant. Another one, OECD presentation on corporate governance. We've covered that, I think, in our lecture notes this time around. But again, just another little perspective on corporate governance. Victorian Government Risk Management Framework. Now, hopefully some of you will have already looked that up and give you a feel for what's in a risk management framework sort of process. But I think this is all stuff you would have covered for assignment 2. RIMS, you're probably familiar with. I think I've given that one to you already. Standard & Poor's paper on ERM. That's something else that you should have already found, I think, or I gave to you. Sustainability reporting from KPMG. That's another perspective on sustainability. Not a bad introduction. Now, I'm not expecting you to go and read these things in detail. I mean, hopefully at your level now, you'll be able to. You'll be fairly good at almost skim reading type of stuff and picking out the guts of a document or the direction of a document. And I find that reading usually. The way documents are structured, the usual structure is that the introduction tells everybody what is going to be told in the paper, and then the conclusion tells you what you've just been told, and the middle bit is kind of like telling you the long story of the same thing. So often you can read the introductory sections, and then often flick over to the conclusion sections. And very quickly you've got the guts of what's going on in a document. So that's a tip, if you like, to work your way through lots of material quickly. The sustainability beyond ERM. I think that may have been included in the notes. Business continuity national audit practice. Not sure that I've given you that one. I think, is that familiar to anybody? National Audit Practice paper? No? I'll dig that up. It's a nice sort of easy guide on business continuity. Okay. Managing global supply chains, McKinsey. That's an old paper. Not too worried. A couple of insurance papers on insurable risk management. There's one a little bit on captives there, and then the essential guide to small business insurance. That's already, I think, included in the study guide. There's a guide to developing a balanced scorecard. Here as well. That's a good site to have a look at. Just as all practical, and have a go at that, trying to think up some objectives and measures and how would you do that. Some exercises. Try a mind map of corporate governance, enterprise risk topics, showing how they connect and relate. Just talked about that before. Outline a business continuity management framework for Timberco case study. So what would be included in a business continuity management framework for that case study that we covered earlier a few weeks ago. So that will just give you a bit of background. Try a risk assessment. Put some risks together. For that. Do you remember that terminology that we just covered tonight? Have a go at thinking up we're using a case study and putting some risks and structuring those risks and describing them. The difference between sustainability and insurance in large and small companies. It's not a bad thing to think about. What's the difference between risk management in small companies and risk management in large companies? what might those differences be? Balanced scorecard for Timberco. So, yeah. So there's a few things to have a go at. Exam preparation techniques. Like I said, have a go at the past papers. Definitely the timing. Right? There was a lot of people losing a lot of marks last year. They were doing too much on early questions and not enough on final questions. So, when you go into the exam, make sure that you're really disciplined with your time. And we don't give marks on how many booklets you write. Some people might think that's the case. Remember also that we have to read them. So if your handwriting's bad, spare a thought for us. If we can't read it, we can't give you marks for it. And we want to give you marks. I mean, we're not here, not to give you marks. We want to give you marks, but we need to be able to read it. So and somebody mentioned, can we use bullet points? Yeah, you can use bullet points if you want to. That's fine. I think if you can communicate, using relatively short sentences, getting your points across, that's fine. I've not got a problem with that. Our marking sheet, is very small, and these are the sort of the things that we want to read, and so it gives you an idea. We don't have to read reams and reams of paragraphs or discussion or stuff that's been copied, from one paper to the next. We're not really interested in that. We're interested in what's coming out of your head, and if you can express that succinctly and communicates to us well, then we'll give you marks for that. So don't feel that you've got to write endless essays of that sort of stuff. There was a point raised in one of the 2009 paper, question 6, it said name 6 classes of insurance. There is in the study guide, it says there's 3 classes of insurance. So really, I mean, the study guide is probably wrong actually, because it talks about people insurance, property insurance, and liability insurance. Now those are types of insurance, not necessarily classes of insurance. So the study guide is wrong there. Classes of insurance are liability, property, boiler machinery. I can't think of any more now off the top of my head. Brain's too tired. But hopefully you get the picture there. Okay. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? This is our last lecture as a group together. Next Thursday, I'm going to see if I can get a room, and then I can't think of the term, but I'll put something on DSO by hopefully Tuesday to say that I'm going to be in a room on Thursday, probably in the afternoon, Thursday afternoon, that you can come and have a chat if you've got any specific questions. Hopefully not too many people turn up because the queues get too long. And what I'll also do, I did this last year and I'll try again. There's an online chat room type setup. I think we can, I can't remember what it's called, but I'll see if I can set one of those up. Probably maybe Thursday evening or something. That's hopefully, I mean, you're welcome to join there. Ideally, that's for the distance students, so they can have an opportunity to ask me difficult questions. So I'll post some notices on that. So final words. No more questions. Any other questions before we? Good luck, everybody, and thank you very much for all your work. It's been great. Thank you.